This podcast is brought to you by PLI, the Practicing Law Institute. PLI is committed to keeping you ever current on the dynamic trends shaping the legal world. Learn more at pli.edu/ftpod.
Welcome to Fast Tracked, Emergent Issues in the Legal Profession, brought to you by the Practicing Law Institute. I'm your host, Jen Leonard, founder of Creative Lawyers. Buckle up as we hit the gas and explore the most dynamic trends shaping the legal world. I hope you'll join us as we explore the future of law today. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Fast Track podcast. I'm your host, Jen Leonard, founder of Creative Lawyers, and I am so excited today to be joined by another entrepreneur and founder, Jess Sargus, who is the CEO and founder of The Legal Athlete, a coaching and consulting company that she founded to combat the epidemic of burnout and mental and physical illness in our profession. Hi, Jess. It's so great to see you.
Hi, Jen. It's great to see you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you. And just to fill the audience in a little bit, we're going to get into your new venture in this podcast. But I have to tell you that Jess Sargus was a colleague of mine about 20 years ago when I worked for a law firm, my first real job out of law school, and was one of the most exceptional lawyers that I've still had the chance to encounter. And I modeled so much of my behavior, or tried to, against what Jess was doing, because I just found you to be so incredibly impressive. So thank you so much for putting up with me in my first days of practice.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for the kind words, but it was very apparent to me and anyone else who worked with you that you were a star from day one, even if it didn't feel that way. So I am honored that we have this mutual, very positive start to your career.
It definitely did not feel that way. So thank you. Thank you for those kind words. And I want to hear all about your journey since the last time I saw you. So tell us a little bit about how your legal journey started and how you found your way to what you're doing today.
So as happens with a lot of law students, I spent my 2L summer at the firm that we both were at, and really loved the people, and returned. And I worked there at that historic corporate general litigation firm in Philadelphia for my first 12 years of practice. And again, I loved the analysis part. I loved finding interesting ways to delve into each new litigation. And I've also found that I needed the ability to grow things. That's pretty much the through line through my career. And while I was practicing, I was continuing to box. At that time, it was boxing alone. I started doing mixed martial arts later at about the 10-year mark. And I got the opportunity with a coach that I knew to start my own training center and sports agency for professional combat athletes, for boxers and mixed martial arts fighters. So the last few years of practice, I was also running my first startup business, representing athletes and beginning to compete myself in mixed martial arts as well. And I just was bitten by the bug of the combination of law and business and growth. I left the firm after 12 years, sold my gym in Philadelphia, and moved to Las Vegas, where I bought into a larger gym that trains a lot of UFC fighters, and continued to compete while I worked as a chief counsel and chief of staff at a small startup, tech startup in Las Vegas. Did that for a couple years and found that it was time to retire. At that point, I was 38, and the things that used to bend and stretch when I was training started to snap and break. So I returned to full-time litigation, this time on the plaintiff side, mass tort litigation in New York. And did that for almost 4 years as well. Really honed a lot of my negotiation and strategy skills, leading a team there. But I missed, again, building. And I had been bitten by the entertainment bug while I was representing fighters. So I got the opportunity to join Marvel Studios as counsel and learn entertainment on the big screen, literally, with their films, also television and digital and new media, and loved it. But it was about a year in when I got the opportunity to be legal hire number one for a tech startup in the creator space and build their legal department from the ground up, including all of their templates and negotiating processes and playbooks. And it was just an opportunity that I couldn't miss as much as I loved Marvel and Disney. So I was there for almost 4 years. We took the company through a unicorn valuation round, became a $1 billion plus company, represented some of the biggest creators in the world. And I just loved the experience, loved building a global team of over 13 across 8 different time zones. And it reached a point at which I felt like the team was ready for a new challenge. I was ready for a new challenge. So I became chief legal officer for a personal injury firm here in Austin, where I'd moved during the pandemic, and really got to hone some of my operational skills across all the departments. But yet again, I felt like I really wanted to be captain of my own ship and address some of the issues that I'd seen my colleagues struggling with, particularly burnout and the mental and physical illness that a lot of lawyers, particularly trial lawyers, struggle with because it is such a high stress, high demand profession. And I found that the strategies and the skills that I learned as a high stress combat fighter, as well as a pro athlete, coach, and manager, were really transferable almost directly to the high stress stakes of being a trial lawyer and needing to execute under pressure. So that's when the idea for founding my own coaching and consulting company, The Legal Athlete, came. And I've been so happy. It launched in September and have been able to devote myself full time to this project and this mission of bringing elite athletic performance to trial lawyers.
That's amazing. I mean, it sounds like the standard lawyer story: start in practice and then become a mixed martial arts professional athlete and represent other UFC fighters. I mean, I think we've all met that lawyer. But this is what I love about you, because you have so much practical experience and so much hands-on experience as a lawyer at the highest levels. And you also have this athletic background at the highest levels and working with others to coach them. So you talked a little bit about your focus on trial lawyers. What is it about trial lawyers that really inspires you to be applying the techniques you learned as a coach to their work? What is, so different about trial law than other areas of practice?
I think legal work in general is a pretty high stress, demanding profession. But for me, trial law has the most direct correlation to in an athlete, fight day or, game day for a different sport, where there is a discrete and shortened time period when they need to execute at the highest level. And it's all or nothing. It's win or lose. Very similar to getting in the cage, and you either win or you don't. So the stress and the mental techniques for focus and resilience and executing your best strategy, even when it feels like someone's trying to kill you, is, I think, the reason why I've focused on trial law in particular, because I think that's, number one, they can use it. I understand it from the inside out. And I think it really, it might not seem like it from the outside, but for me, there's really just a direct correlation between the challenges that an athlete faces and the challenges that a trial lawyer faces in terms of executing in the moment.
Yeah, I love that analogy and that connection between the two, because as you're saying it's clear to me how similar they are. And yet I think for most lawyers, we don't generally think about the physical corollary of what we're doing. But I know that your work is
Mhm.
grounded in neuroscience, and
Mhm.
we try to focus on our intellectual capacity, our ability to perform. But I'd love to hear from you about some of the physiological implications of those high stress environments that trial lawyers find themselves in. What are sort of the physical results of not paying attention to what's happening in your body as you're going through this high stakes event?
Sure, sure. I'm so glad you brought this up. The the physical wellness aspect of this is really an important foundation of the optimal performance system that I've developed to work with lawyers. And that's because if your physical environment just feels it's very difficult to perform at your best. And so some of the physical results that we can see from working in a highly sedentary, high stress environment are things like high blood pressure, cardiovascular issues, depression, anxiety, a lot of it can be weight gain, high cortisol, all of these aspects that kind of keep your brain floating in stress hormones that diminish its ability to perform both day to day and under pressure, and also keep your body from being able to support that brain in its highest function. And also, and as we know, like if you feel bad, if you've in eating overly rich foods constantly, or whatever's in the vending machine, and taking 3 energy drinks a day in order to make it through because you're sleep deprived. That's another one. Sleep deprivation also
Mm.
diminishes your mental capacity. All of these things basically make it so that you are not set up for your most successful performance. And so that's why it's important in my system to make sure that we're taking care of the whole body as well as mental and emotional wellness in order to set the play or set the field for the optimal performance for the person. I think it's important to realize too that there is that interconnection between the physical and the mental performance aspect. And one of the things I try to impart to my clients as well as listeners on my podcast is that high performance is a lifestyle more than it is an event. If you do the little things every day to keep yourself healthy, keep your emotional and mental environment primed for performance, then in the moments of high stress and high stakes, you're going to be able to perform better. But you can't just like an athlete, you can't just practice real hard the day before and expect that you're going to be perfect on game day. It's the little things and the repetitions that make your high performance lifestyle pervasive that are going to set you up for the most success.
And so, what are some of the techniques, Jess, that you advocate that lawyers use, especially trial lawyers? But I would imagine any lawyer. As you said, we are a profession that's known for high stress and high stakes environments that are sort of relentless in some ways. It's the nature of the job. So, what are some of the things that you recommend lawyers do to start to develop, like you said, this lifestyle of peak performance, not just preparing to get through a trial or a deal?
I try to keep it as simple as possible for everyone because everyone has different demands on their time, different also outside of work obligations, family, etc. So my number one tip is just try to move every day. Ideally, you'll move for at least a half an hour every day, doing some sort of exercise that stretches your muscles and gets you breathing a little bit harder. And it can be a walk, it can be high intensity workouts, it could be boxing or mixed martial arts, or it could just be swimming, something yoga, something that moves your body. And the most important thing is a total of at least 30 minutes. So if you've got a crazy day and all you can do is 10 minutes 3 times during the day, do that. But it's important every day you want to put a check mark that you've moved that day. The other thing is I'm identifying not only things that allow lawyers to feel the best for their profession, but for longevity too, of their life and their career. So another thing is I advocate reading or meditating once a day as well to get some of that energy back, stimulate your brain in a different way, take a moment for calm. That's one of the things that studies have shown has a huge impact on your longevity. Third is connect with a family or a friend. That connection with your community, that realizing that you're a part of a bigger whole rather than feeling like the entire world's burdens are on your shoulders is incredibly huge. And so those are the main things that I try to have as a baseline for everyone and in terms of their physical and mental environment. And then depending on everyone's goals and particular life circumstances, I modify it for folks to be either higher intensity recommendations or more mental or emotional techniques.
Yeah, I love all of those. And especially that third one, the relationship piece. I've seen those studies on the blue zones in the world where people live longest and they correlate their long lives or connect them with the quality of their community and their relationships. And then in legal, I think the Harvard Business Review a few years ago identified us as the loneliest profession, which I think might be surprising to people outside of the legal profession because it's so human. But I think what you're saying is so important about finding community and connection. What do you think are the reasons that drive lawyers to be either isolated or sedentary or pushing to the side their own basic needs for elevating their lifestyles?
Part of it is there's a lot of people who get into law who are lifetime overachievers, high achievers. And there is a huge overlap between high achievers and folks who struggle with feeling like they're enough and that they're worthy without constant output, showing and demonstrating it. And one of the things that I try to help my clients realize is that you are worthy to begin with and that your output as a lawyer is the product of your worthiness, not the proof of it. And so I think it's very easy for lawyers to think, you know what, I'm only as good as what I did yesterday. And so if I didn't excel yesterday, if I didn't do as much as possible and burn the candles at both ends, then somehow I'm not doing what is expected of me for my firm, for my clients, for my family. So a big part of working with lawyers is realizing that number one, no one is being served the best by you emptying your cup. If you don't have the energy to perform at your best, you're not serving your firm your best. You're not serving your client your best. And you're not leaving anything left over for yourself and for your family and for your friends and your community, which are all vital parts of you being the highest performing and most fulfilled person that you can be. So helping people realize that taking care of yourself is not a luxury. It's actually the most high performance thing you can do. And it's also critical and important for your wellness. My old Jewish grandma used to say, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. But that's sort of true. I think it's very true in law as well. And so helping to kind of bring perspective that while it seems like everyone is counting on us as lawyers to have the answers and to do it ourselves if no one else can do it with us, I think realizing that sometimes the best way to elevate is to delegate and to associate with people who can help you, who might be better at a specific aspect than you, and to fill your own cup so that you can actually be at your best for everyone. I think that's the critical realization. And that helps counter that incredible loneliness where you feel like I've got to solve all the problems by myself right now at great personal cost. Or am I really doing everything that I need to do as a lawyer and a professional?
I love that. And I particularly love what you said about my output is the product of my worthiness, not the proof of my worthiness. You're making me think of a friend of mine who's also one of my favorite lawyers to work with. And she always says that your best attributes or the things that you do the best can be a double-edged sword, and it can also be your worst attribute. And I think that's so true of lawyers, that our desire to really be perfect and provide for others and be exceptional at everything that we do can ultimately also be our undoing. And I love that point about finding things to delegate so that you can fill your cup. I know that's very hard for people too. And you started talking about burning the candle at both ends, and that raises the concept of burnout. And I really would love to hear your thoughts on burnout. I thought about burnout and taught about it for a long time to law students, but I had not actually experienced it directly until the pandemic hit. And that was the first time I actually experienced not exhaustion, but burnout. And I was amazed at how dangerous it is with respect to your ability to really move yourself forward. So I'm curious how you would define burnout and what makes it different from just being tired or needing a vacation.
Mhm. Sure. Burnout is a series of physiological and mental experiences that together are more pervasive than just I'm tired or I'm a little sleep deprived. With burnout, you have expended or overextended your efforts for so long that your cognitive ability is diminished. You're not performing at the level that you have been previously. You've got cognitive fog. You're more cynical and more irritated with everyone. It's very hard to motivate to do anything. You find yourself procrastinating more, and all of this is kind of a spiraling cycle, because for a high performer who's used to being able to accomplish a lot, get it going really quickly, feel good about it, feel positive about it, this sequence of you're not doing as much as you could be anymore, and you are angry about it, and you feel like, oh, I'm not as good as I once was. All of this impacts your emotional health as well, because now it's self-directed. Oh, I know I'm not doing what I could be. I'm not doing as much. And there's this negative feedback loop as well. Meanwhile, you're also impacting your relationships, because your family or your friends, they see you being irritated. They see you tired, physiologically tired as well. You may be having sleep disruptions, either not able to get to sleep or not able to stay asleep. All of these things are going to impact your relationships that normally would be helping you get your energy back and be on more of an even keel. So it's this full-blown systemic syndrome that that you get not only through just discrete overwork periods, but long-term overwork and diminishment without taking the time to rest and recover and restore the things that feed your soul, that fill that cup. So I've experienced it a few times during my career, both in litigation. Very easy to do it as the only lawyer in a startup company as well, where there was no one else to pass it off. And again, felt like my product was my proof of worthiness rather than the just the demonstration. So it's very hard to secure that space for yourself, to save yourself with some boundaries. And just if I could, a brief note about boundaries.
Yeah,
Is that
please.
often they're sort of derided as a negative thing, or a millennial way to say something is not PC with me. But really, boundaries are the biggest high performance tool in your arsenal. It's the way for you to basically put what is getting you closer to your goals in a fast lane. So think about your goals as a bowling lane, and your boundaries are the bumpers,
Hmm.
so that when you are saying no to things that keep you distracted or divert your energy away from your goals, you're actually saying yes to, all right, I'm going to take every day the steps to accomplish my goals and also to save that time for what's most important to me and for myself, and ultimately accomplish my goals more consistently, more reliably by saving that space. So I think Warren Buffett actually said that the most successful people say no to almost everything.
Huh.
And it's really understanding that you are saving yourself for what is most important to you, that you don't have to do everything, and that it's not a negative. It's really that you are saying yes to what you've decided is most important to you for your career and for your life.
I love that. I love the bowling lane analogy. And I'm thinking, I've had this experience when I've sort of talked about well-being with our students, especially with law students. It all sounds like it all makes sense on a logical level, but then you get into the thick of practice and, you know, boundary setting is something that you might have the best intention to do. And then a client comes in with a new question that is, an emergency, and you have to be in this meeting also. So you have to sacrifice whatever you were going to do. What does boundary setting actually look like in a way that balances your professional obligations with like really needing to carve out time for yourself? What would a practical sort of approach to that look like for a lawyer?
Great point. I think that it's got to be way more fluid for lawyers. And it ultimately comes down to real time reprioritization. So you may have your schedule for the day planned and your time blocks set out for work and movement, etc. What happens when someone comes in with an emergency problem? Number one, if you have evaluated that it is actually in fact an emergency, then you have to reprioritize. All right, what else in my day is non-negotiable that I need to make sure that I'm making time for, and what can I shift that isn't as emergent? For me, the non-negotiable is really that movement, not only because of the physical but also the mental rejuvenation that gives you, and it's going to allow you to have more longevity during that day. So, the client may come in for that meeting. After the meeting, take 10 minutes to take a walk. It's going to allow you to refocus. The best science is telling us that we can maintain deep focus for about 90 minutes at a time. And then we need a 20-minute recharge period. And some people will just go sit down at their desk and immediately start looking at the emails that came in while they were at their meeting. And that's not going to refill your energy. That's not going to give your brain the rest that you really need. So my best advice is take those 10 minutes to 20-minute breaks after you've been in deep work for 90 minutes. Sometimes it's longer, and let your brain reset. Look at, some trees outside or, breathe some air. It's going to serve you best. And that should be your non-negotiable. And then the rest of it, there may be days when you don't have time for more than a 10-minute walk. Give yourself some grace to say, all right, I'm going to just check this one off the list for today. Tomorrow, I'm going to try to save more time for X, Y, and Z. But it's really reprioritizing in shifting inputs and being ruthless about what is non-negotiable for your health and what is really non-negotiable for your clients and for your career.
I love that. And I feel like there's so much focus in legal, even in the junior years, built in around time management, project management. And one thing that I don't think I fully appreciated until I started actually like getting a little bit older is energy management, which it sounds like that's what your work is really promoting, as being intentional about where you're placing your energy because it's finite, right?
It's true. We like to think that you can just push past every wall, particularly, again, as lawyers, we very much take on this altruistic mantle of wanting to save everybody, but ourselves. And so we don't protect ourselves while we're trying to serve others. And ultimately, there is a finite amount of energy that you have. There are physical and neuroscience facts about what you can and can't push through, and you can't push through burnout. It is a mental neuroscience and physiological fact that the only way to get over burnout is to rest and recover. And if you push yourself past that point in practice, you can either choose to take a break or your body and your brain are going to choose it for you. There's a quick story. When I was training and getting ready for a fight, I was realizing that my elbow had gotten pretty swollen. And so I went to the doctor, swollen and painful. I went to the doctor, got diagnosed with tendinitis. I'm like, okay, well, the protocol for healing tendinitis is rest, ice, and not to use it for a matter of weeks while it recovers, while the tendon inflammation goes down. So I got this diagnosis, went immediately to the gym, started working out again, doing pull-ups, and my coach had, I was mentioning, I got this tendinitis, elbow tendinitis diagnosis. And he looked at me and he's like, are you in whole? And I'm like, am I a what? And he's like, what do you need to do for your elbow to get better? And I'm like, yeah, I have to rest and recover. And what are you doing? I'm continuing to work it. He's like, so is it going to get better? No. All right. So are you an a-hole? And I was. And that's what happens with burnout as well, is you may feel and realize that you've got burnout and keep doing the exact same things, but something is going to give, your body is going to give, or you're going to get into a mental space where you're no longer being able to function, 50% as well as you are. And it's going to force you to take that break that you don't take for yourself. So don't be an A word. Take that rest.
Take that rest. And it's such a great analogy too, because so many lawyers feel like it's coming on, but I've got to do this. I've got to get back to the office. I have to finish this insert work product by the end of the day. So you and I are, I would say, really lucky that we have a lot of professional experience and we can draw from that and build new things and get to do exciting new things with our careers. I think a lot about junior lawyers and, the stress that they are under, both in a changing world, but also because they haven't yet established their professional reputation. And I sometimes hear more senior lawyers complain about, kids today, and they want work-life balance and they want all of these things. And I don't think it's always true across the board. But I'm curious what your advice would be to junior lawyers who are trying to almost combat a generational stereotype about their approach to balance while also actually trying to promote balance in their life. What would you recommend to them?
Yeah, it is difficult with any generational shift or advancement. There's going to be a lot of friction. And I fully realize, certainly the culture that we started our careers in, like the expectation was you burn yourself out. The expectation was that you never say no. You never say, no, I don't have room on my plate. And that was the very intentional acculturation that we were given in law firms in particular. And I know that continues. I think that some of the law firms now have, particularly larger law firms, have more recognition of the importance of wellness for longevity and to avoid high rate of turnover and attrition that happens, particularly with younger lawyers who just don't want this lifestyle. I mean, you yourself realized, I think early on, this was not for you. And that's part of my mission, because I think there are so many benevolent and altruistic people who start out in the profession and end up leaving it because of the lifestyle, because of this older culture. And I want to help people get the tools and the strategies to start modernizing it in ways that work for them and for their firms. And so you asked about strategies. I think it is a difficult line for particularly very young lawyers to draw. One of the ways I would have them think about it is your ultimate goal is to do your best work that you are given for the partners, for the other lawyers who are relying on you. And overpromising and under-delivering isn't going to serve you in your career. So I would counsel them to just be very clear on whether something is an emergency or whether it is not as time sensitive. Get clear on when things really need to be done by, and then over communicate. All right, well, I have, X, Y, and Z project that has this deadline. I can get this to you by X deadline. Will that work? If not, are there additional team members that I could work with on this, et cetera? So be solution focused and over communicate in terms of what is already on your plate, so that you don't assume something is more urgent than it needs to be, or that you have to do it all by yourself.
That's great. And I love the sort of approach of really centering your professionalism in the communication of, I think where things sort of go sideways for junior lawyers is that to complement them as a generation, they are much more aware of these issues. They are educated more about these issues as they're coming through school. And then they reach professional landscape where maybe they are communicating that this is for my own health and wellness, that I need to set these boundaries, but they are colliding with different generations where what those generations hear is I'm not willing to put in what it takes to be successful here. So reframing that as you want to do your best work on this project and I just want to manage expectations accordingly sounds like the approach.
Right. That's the win-win. You find that ultimate interest that you're both serving is the best work for the firm and or the company and your clients, and that putting that forefront while there's other things certainly that going into it, particularly younger generation is more comfortable with prioritizing their wellness. If you can find that overlap of this is suiting both of our goals and I want us both to make sure that we're as successful as possible, I think you can find that middle ground.
And Jess, law schools are starting to focus more on well-being as part of the law student experience. We could have a whole other podcast about our law school experiences and how different they were than today's students in terms of culture. But what do you think legal education should be teaching law students about what they're about to step into in practice and how to really be prepared and respond to that stress?
I think a good place to start is to give the law students the science and the neuroscience, so that it's not just based on the subjective experience of no one wants to feel bad and, prioritizing your wellness is a good thing. I think giving them the science behind why it's critical. We're lawyers, we're in law school being trained to think like a lawyer, which is analyzing the fact pattern and then figuring out a strategy and a course forward and the argument forward. And giving law students that information allows them to strategize how they're going to work that into their life going forward and how it fits into their overall goals for a long and fulfilled and happy professional life. So I would start with that kind of education. And I would recommend also, we're not really as focused on practical practice skills, or I know it's changed a lot since I was in law school over 20 years ago, but I think helping younger generations on their communication skills and negotiation, because negotiation isn't just deal making or, settlement negotiations. Negotiation is, all right, I've got this project that I've just been given. How do I negotiate getting it done with the best results in a time that is feasible and to the best of my ability? So I think the younger generations tend to be more removed from the close interpersonal and direct face-to-face discussions that you have in a business and in a law firm. And so I think practicing negotiation and practicing direct and strategic communication might be a great way to set law students up for success, to prioritize both their wellness and their professional advancement.
Yeah, I love those ideas. And as you were talking about the generational shift in maybe less frequent interpersonal communication, it was also making me think that generations coming out of school now might face heightened loneliness, which has already been a problem for the profession. But we're seeing research around social media and teenagers, and those teenagers are now coming into law schools. So I think all of your advice is so important, maybe more important now than ever, especially post COVID too. So I love those thoughts. And I want to wrap up with something that I saw in your thought leadership. And I'm so curious about it, Jess. You talk about this concept of glimmer. What is glimmer?
A glimmer is basically the opposite of a trigger. And again, not to go into the younger generation terminology, but a trigger is some event or something that sends you into a negative emotional space, might set you off in an unreasonable way. A glimmer is the opposite. It is a small moment or event that gives you a sense of joy or calm or peace. So a glimmer could be watching, a bird take flight in your morning walk, or a really good cup of coffee, or a friend saying something nice to you. My glimmer today was the wonderful story you shared about the beginning of your professional career, Jen. Those are glimmers, and the neuroscience of glimmers is really amazing. Our brains are changing and growing in terms of their neuronal connections throughout our entire lives, and we know this. And when you start to consciously make time during your day, whether it's once, whether it's a few times, looking for a glimmer, looking for something that gives you peace or gratitude or satisfaction, you're training your brain in a way that is now looking for positive outcomes. Just as a matter of evolution, our brains are highly attuned to negative, watching out for danger, watching out for bad things. But when you start to retrain it to watch out for good things, your brain neuroplasticity changes and grows in ways that you are starting to feel more positive things, feel more gratitude throughout the day. And that increases all the wonderful neurotransmitters, the dopamines and norepinephrines and all of those things that keep your brain in a positive state where you're more able to think strategically and quickly in the moments. And it supports all of your life activities. Plus, it feels nice. So going back to that subjective. So I really advocate for everyone to start their glimmer habit. And at the end of each day, write down one great thing that made them feel happy or calm or content in the moment.
I love that for so many reasons. One, like you said, sometimes lawyers will overthink this, right? And how can I be better at my job? How can I be better for everybody? But it also just feels better to be focused on something positive. And it also sounds like something that's much easier for lawyers to fit into their busy schedule of writing down and looking for one thing. And then that one thing grows to two. And like you're saying, over time, you're rewiring your brain. I love that. Well, Jess, my glimmer for today has been this conversation. It's been seeing you again. To your point, relationships are the most important thing in our lives for our health and well-being, and being a part of your legal network has been such a benefit to me. And I'm grateful to you for all of your support, truly, in my junior years when I was just flailing and trying to figure things out. I'm so grateful. And I'm so excited for you in your new endeavor. And how can people follow everything that you're doing? Where should they go to keep up with your thought leadership?
Absolutely. And I'm so grateful to you, Jen, not only for the work that you are doing to help law students create careers that they love and that they succeed in, but what you're doing now with keeping your mission first first in your mind of modernizing legal practice. It's so important, and you're so incredibly capable and wonderful at it. So I'm excited and honored to have been able to have this conversation with you. If folks would like to continue to follow me, they can find my podcast, the Legal Athlete Podcast, on Apple and Spotify and YouTube. Also, probably the best way to reach out is you can connect with me or message me on LinkedIn. I'm Jess Sargus, Sargus. And you can also find me on my website, thelegalathlete.com.
I love it, Jess. And definitely go to Jess's website because you'll see pictures of her from her MMA fighting. And it's definitely a different look from her lawyer persona. And I love that you've found ways to combine both of those into the great work you're doing. Can't wait to see you again, Jess. Let's not make it be 20 years this time around.
Absolutely.
And I really thank you. Thank you so much for being on the Fast Tracked podcast and for sharing your expertise with the community.
Thank you, Jen. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week.
I hope you enjoyed this fascinating conversation as much as I did. Visit pli.edu for more insights, education, and resources for navigating this dynamic landscape. And until next time, stay curious and stay adaptable as we work together to chart a course into an exciting future.